Hello dear students, I welcome you to this important lecture on environmental ethics, a subject that guides how we should think, feel and act towards the natural world. As of now, climate change, pollution and ecological crisis, environmental ethics has become more relevant than ever. Today, we will explore how moral values and ethical thinking can help us protect the earth and ensure a sustainable future. Following are the objectives of this lecture. Understand the concept of environmental ethics, explain why the need for environmental ethics arose, identify the key features of environmental ethics, examine the various ethical approaches and their relevance to environmental ethics. Dear students, the story of environmental ethics does not begin in modern classroom or international conferences. It begins the moment human beings first started altering the world around them. From ancient times, when small communities lived in harmony with forests, rivers and mountains, nature was not merely a resource. It was a sacred companion, a life-supporting force that shaped cultures, beliefs and survival. Hence, acts as the foundation of existence. However, as human societies expanded, especially with the rise of agriculture, industry and scientific progress, this harmonious relationship began to shift. The Industrial Revolution marked a turning point. Machines changed production, industries grew, and human demands on nature multiplied. Forests shrank, rivers were polluted and species began to disappear at unprecedented rates. For the first time in history, humanity possessed the power not just to use nature but to damage it irreversibly. So, dear students, what do you think? What is our moral responsibility towards the natural world? This question gave birth to environmental ethics, a distinct branch of philosophy that examines the values, principles and moral duties humans have towards the environment. It emerges from the realization that environmental problems are not only scientific or economic, they are deeply ethical. How should we treat animals? Do trees and rivers have rights? How much of nature's resources can we use? What responsibilities do we owe to future generations? Environmental ethics seeks to answer these questions by shifting the human-centered worldview to a broader, more inclusive one where all living beings, ecosystems and even future generations are considered morally significant. In today's world, marked by climate change, deforestation, species extinction and global pollution, environmental ethics is not just an academic subject. It is a moral compass guiding nations, communities and individuals towards sustainability, conservation and responsible living. Thus, environmental ethics arose from history's lessons, humanity's growing power and the urgent need to protect the planet that sustains life. It calls upon us to rethink our relationship with nature not as masters but as caretakers entrusted with a shared home. Dear students, the term environmental ethics consists of two words, ethics and environment. The word ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, meaning character, custom, or moral disposition. Thus, etymologically, ethics refers to the principles, values, and standards that guide human conduct and help distinguish between right and wrong. It is concerned with moral behavior, duties, and responsibilities that shape individual and social life. On the other hand, the term environment comes from the French word environner, which means to surround or to encircle. Thus, etymologically, environment denotes everything that surrounds an organism, including physical, biological, and social conditions. Dear learners, environmental ethics is a branch of applied philosophy that explores the moral relationship between human beings and the natural world. It questions how humans perceive nature and how our actions influence ecological balance. In the 21st century, this field has gained immense significance due to global challenges such as climate change, deforestation, pollution, and the loss of biodiversity. Environmental ethics invites us to reflect on whether nature has an intrinsic value or is merely a resource meant for exploitation. Environmental ethics refers to the responsibility to understand the environmental consequences of our consumption and the need to recognize our individual and social responsibility to conserve natural resources and protect the earth for future generations. According to Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, environmental ethics is the discipline in philosophy that studies the moral relationship of human beings to and also the value and moral status of the environment and its non-human contents. Now, the second objective of this module is why the need for environmental ethics arose. Dear students, have you ever stopped to ask yourself why our planet is facing such serious environmental crisis today? The answer lies in how human beings have used and misused nature. This growing environmental damage created the urgent need for environmental ethics, which offers us moral guidance and practical solutions to protect, conserve, and restore our natural world. Following points will highlight why the need for environmental ethics arose. Number one, rapid industrialization and technological growth. With the Industrial Revolution, human beings gained unprecedented power to modify nature. Factories, machines, and urban expansion cause massive pollution, deforestation, river contamination, and loss of wildlife. Such large-scale damage created a realization: science and technology alone cannot guide human actions. Ethics must also play a role. Number next is population explosion. An increasing population increased the demand of food, housing, and resources, putting pressure on natural systems. Ethics help us guide responsible use of limited resources. Number third, environmental crisis becoming global. Unlike ancient environmental problems that were local, today's issues are global, such as climate change, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, species extinction, toxic waste accumulation, etc. These global threats raised questions of responsibility, justice, and fairness, leading to the formation of environmental ethics as a field. Next is waste generation and plastic pollution. Modern lifestyle produce excessive waste. Ethics promotes recycling and waste reduction. Number next is imbalanced human-nature relationships. Traditional societies viewed nature as sacred and interconnected. Modern societies treat nature as a resource to exploit. Environmental ethics emerged to correct this imbalance and rebuild a harmonious relationship between human and nature. Now, coming to third objective. Dear learners, as we continue our discussion on environmental ethics, let us now focus on its key features that guide responsible human behavior towards nature. So, environmental ethics has certain defining features that make it unique among all branches of philosophy and social sciences. These features explain how the discipline evaluates human behavior, assigns value to nature, and guides society towards sustainable living. Understanding these characteristics is essential for developing a holistic and responsible approach to environmental care. Intrinsic value of nature. Environmental ethics teaches that nature has worth in itself, not just for human use. Plants, animals, rivers, forests, and ecosystems deserve respect simply because they exist. This shifted the moral view from utility-based to value-based appreciation of nature. It encourages protection irrespective of human benefits. Interdependence and holistic perspective. Environmental ethics emphasizes that all elements of nature are interconnected. Disturbing one component affects the stability of the entire ecosystem. Humans, as part of this web, not separate from it. The holistic view promotes ecosystem-wide conservation rather than isolated measures. Moral responsibility towards our nature. Humans are considered caretakers or stewards of Earth. This feature highlights ethical duties towards conserving the environment. It rejects reckless exploitation and promotes sustainable decision-making. Here, responsibility is for both individual and collective. Now, sustainability as a guiding principle. Sustainability ensures that resources are used without exhausting them. Environmental ethics promotes balance between development and conservation. It encourages renewable energy, efficient resource use, and waste reduction. This feature forms the backbone of modern environmental policies. Now, environmental justice and equity. This feature highlights fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens. Marginalized communities often face more pollution and fewer resources. Environmental ethics demands protection for vulnerable groups and equal rights. It links ecology with human rights and social fairness. Next is respect for biodiversity. Environmental ethics values the diversity of life forms on Earth. Each species has a role in ecological balance and deserves protection. The feature opposes extinction, habitat loss, and harmful human activities. It fosters conservation programs and wildlife protection. Next is integration of science, culture, and ethics. Environmental ethics is interdisciplinary, combine scientific knowledge with moral values. It draws insights from ecology, sociology, economics, culture, and philosophy. This enables well-rounded environmental decision-making. It shapes policies that are both scientifically sound and ethically balanced. Now, the last objective of this module. Dear learners, to understand environmental ethics in a deeper and more practical way, it is important to examine the different ethical approaches that guide human attitudes and actions toward nature. These approaches may include: number one, anthropocentric approach, human-centered ethics. This approach places humans at the center of moral consideration. Nature is valued primarily for the benefits it provides to human beings. While criticized for being human-centered, anthropocentrism still informs many modern sustainability models, where protecting nature is essential for long-term human survival. This approach highlights natural resources are valued instrumentally as means to human welfare. Environmental protection is justified when it serves human interests, health, economic stability, survival, recreation, etc. Common in early environmental policies and development planning. The anthropocentric approach has historically dominated human thinking about nature. It assumes that humans are the most important entities in the moral universe and that the natural environment exists mainly to serve human needs. Under this view, forests are protected because they provide oxygen, rainfall regulation, and raw materials. Rivers are conserved because they supply drinking water and irrigation, and wildlife is preserved when it contributes to tourism or ecological services beneficial to humans. Although critics argue that this approach encourages exploitation, modern environmental governance often relies on anthropocentric reasoning to justify conservation. Climate change mitigation, pollution control, and biodiversity protection are frequently defended on the grounds that environmental degradation ultimately threatens human survival, health, and economic stability. Thus, even today, anthropocentrism remains influential in sustainable development policies and international environmental agreements. Second approach is biocentric approach, also called as life-centered ethics. Biocentrism assigns intrinsic value to all living beings, regardless of their utility to humans. This approach promotes conservation, vegetarianism, wildlife protection, and respect for biodiversity. It challenges exploitative attitudes towards nature. Its key points are: every organism has a right to live and flourish. Humans are not morally superior to other species. Ethical decisions should consider the well-being of all forms of life. Biocentrism represents a major shift from human-centered ethics to life-centered ethics. According to this approach, all living organisms, plants, animals, and microorganisms possesses inherent worth simply because they are alive. Humans are viewed as one species among many, not as rulers of the natural world. This ethical framework strongly supports biodiversity, conservation, animal rights movements, and ethical debates on factory farming, animal testing, and habitat destruction. By recognizing the moral standing of all life forms, biocentrism calls for humility, restraint, and responsibility in human interactions with nature. It urges humans to reconsider practices that cause unnecessary harm to other species and promotes coexistence rather than domination. Now let us talk about ecocentric approach, ecosystem-centered ethics. Ecocentrism extends moral value beyond living organisms to include ecosystems, rivers, mountains, soils, and collective ecological systems. Ecocentrism is at the heart of deep ecology movements. environmental laws, protecting landscapes, and modern conservation policies. Focuses on ecological balance and the integrity of natural systems. Supports the idea that ecosystems have intrinsic value independent of human needs. Encourages preservation of habitats, ecological restoration, and sustainable land use. The ecocentric approach broadens ethical concern even further by emphasizing the value of entire ecosystems rather than individual organisms alone. It recognizes that life exists within complex ecological networks and that disrupting these systems can have irreversible consequences. From an ecocentric perspective, a river is not valuable merely because it provides water to humans, but because it is a living system supporting countless species and ecological processes. This approach underpins many contemporary conservation strategies, such as protecting wetlands, maintaining wildlife corridors, and restoring degraded ecosystems. It also influences legal frameworks where natural entities are granted legal rights, reflecting growing recognition of nature's intrinsic value. Now, the next approach is deep ecology approach. This approach, introduced by Aaron Ness, deep ecology argues that all beings have inherent worth and advocates a radical restructuring of human society to live in harmony with nature. This influences environmental activism, eco-conscious lifestyles, and policy frameworks, emphasizing long-term ecological health. This highlights humans are part of the natural world, not separate from it. Overconsumption and industrialism are root causes of ecological crisis. Advocate simplicity, decentralization, and ecological spirituality. Deep ecology goes beyond surface level. Environmental reforms and calls for profound philosophical and cultural change. It challenges the dominant worldview that prioritizes economic growth and material consumption. Instead, it promotes simple living, reduced consumption, and deep respect for nature. Followers of deep ecology argue that environmental problems cannot be solved merely through technology or policy changes. Rather, they require a transformation in human values and lifestyles. This approach has inspired grassroots environmental movements, resistance to large-scale industrial projects, and a renewed interest in indigenous ecological wisdom and spiritual connections with nature. Now, the next is utilitarian approach. This approach proposes that an action is ethical if it leads to the greatest good for the greatest number. This approach is useful in decision making for large projects like dams, industries, mining, though criticized for potentially justifying environmental harm when benefits outweigh costs. It applies cost-benefit analysis in environmental planning, evaluating environmental policies based on societal welfare, balancing economic development with environmental protection. The utilitarian approach plays a significant role in public policy and environmental decision making. Governments often rely on cost-benefit analysis to assess whether development projects should proceed. If the perceived benefits to society outweigh the environmental costs, such projects may be approved. However, critics argue that this approach can undervalue long-term ecological damage and the suffering of marginalized communities or non-human life. Despite these limitations, utilitarian ethics remains influential because they provide a practical framework for evaluating complex environmental choices in a world of competing interests and limited resources. Now the next is ecofeminist approach. Ecofeminism links the oppression of women with the exploitation of nature, arguing that patriarchal systems harm both. This approach enriches environmental ethics by addressing power, equality, and social justice in ecological issues. The key ideas are: nature should not be dominated or controlled. Emphasis, care, empathy, and cooperation. Advocates inclusive, community-based environmental solutions. Ecofeminism highlights the interconnectedness of social injustice and environmental degradation. It argues that systems based on domination, control, and hierarchy lead to both gender inequality and ecological destruction. By emphasizing values such as care, cooperation, and responsibility, ecofeminism offers an alternative ethical framework rooted in relationships rather than exploitation. It supports grassroots environmental movements, women-led conservation initiatives, and sustainable community practices, particularly in developing societies where women often play a central role in managing natural resources. The next approach is social ecology approach. As this approach proposed by Murray Bookchin, social ecology argues that environmental problems are rooted in social inequalities and hierarchical structures. This shows that environmental solutions require social reforms, justice, equality, and community empowerment. This highlights ecological crises arise from political and economic systems. Advocates decentralized democratic communities. Human liberation is linked with ecological liberation. Social ecology emphasizes that environmental crisis cannot be understood in isolation from social, political, and economic structures. According to this view, systems of domination such as capitalism, authoritarianism, and social inequality are primary causes of ecological destruction. This approach calls for democratic participation, local governance, and social justice as essential components of environmental sustainability. By linking human freedom with ecological well-being, social ecology promotes a holistic vision of a just and sustainable society. Dear students, now let us conclude this lecture. Environmental ethics provides an essential moral framework for understanding and responding to the environmental challenges of the modern world. Environmental ethics reminds us that the natural world is not merely a resource for human use, but an interconnected system with intrinsic value that deserves respect and care. Thank you, dear learners, for your attention and thoughtful participation. I hope this lesson has helped you understand the importance of environmental ethics in shaping a sustainable future.